Hello. Welcome to the Jenkins Documentation Office Hours. Today is July 10th. Um, Around the table, we have myself, Kevin Martins, Birajit Saikia, Chris Stern, Megan McRoberts, Bruno Vrachson, and Mark's not here just yet. But we'll keep him on the agenda just in case he does show up after the fact. Um, we'll adjust accordingly later, but there's Mark now. Perfect. Hey, Mark.
Hi.
Hello, mate, Birajit.
Sorry, I'm not. Everybody needs to say hi to me. That's really sweet.
Oh, we're always welcoming. That's the point.
That's right. Very good.
So for the agenda today, I've got the contributor spotlight update. Just checking in on the Java 25 stuff. Reminder for the Jenkins Community Awards. 2 new sponsorship announcements and blog posts from Alex Brandis. Google Summer of Code 2025 notes. We'll check in with Chris about the Chinese documentation site and localization plugin. Good first issues on Jenkins.io again. LTS and weekly releases and advisories. The new header redesign is part of the July LTS. The recent work done on Jenkins.io. New success story and adopter that we've added recently. Just a quick update on wiki migration redirect stuff. The topic of potentially removing the Java 11 upgrade instructions and what's been done with that. And then the 2 topics we've been bringing over is the plugin developer docs and the Blue Ocean deprecation. So we'll see what we have time for if we get to those, but there's nothing really new about these 2 just yet. So more to come on that. But any other topics or anything anyone wants to make sure we cover today? Or does that take care of most topics?
Yeah. Could you scroll down a little bit? There was something that I needed a subtopic on. Which was it? Oh, LTS and weekly releases. Right. We've got an upcoming web live stream. So let's be sure that we mention the upcoming live stream. Right. Thank you.
Great. Thanks,
And
Mark.
that's our first time doing a live stream. Doing a live stream direct from YouTube instead of using Zoom.
Yay. Whoa.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
So first things first on the agenda. So our latest contributor spotlight's been published. It's featuring our very own Meg McRoberts. So really excited about that. Really happy to be able to highlight Meg and share her story and highlight the work she's done. It's really great. So thank you very much, Meg, for participating and sharing that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then right now we don't have any in the pipeline for next step, but I've reached out to Alyssa and Advocacy and Outreach Group to talk about potential next steps. Mark helped me create a list of people from our top contributors, so we've got plenty of people to follow up with. And Alyssa was able to confirm that a couple people who we have reached out to and did say they were happy to submit, but haven't actually prepared or submitted any responses yet. So we're just gonna follow up with them and make sure everything's still on board. And yeah, Mark, what's up?
Yeah, just tell Bruno thank you again for the tracking top contributors data report. That was the source. All that Kevin and I did was walk down that list and say, have we done this one yet? Have we done this one yet? So very nice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, but it's working automatically. I'm not doing anything anymore on the thing. But thank you.
Best story of all.
No news is good news, sort of thing. So, but yeah, so right now there's not any that we have available or preparing, but hopefully that'll change sooner than later. And we'll be sure to follow up when we have more on that. For the Java 25 documentation, so Java 25 docs will be implemented once Jenkins is supporting Java 25. That's right now planned for fall 25 when it's available, and more to come on that. Chris has already created an issue to track that process and the documentation we'll need. And with the recent Java 21 documentation updates, we have a good list of what needs to be updated and what we'll need to make sure is created in addition to that. So more to come. But we're very aware of it, and this will fall in line with the Java support plan that we've published in the last year. So everything looks good there, and more to come on that. the 2025 Jenkins Community Awards. The winners were announced at CDCon a couple weeks ago. We have a blog post that Alyssa wrote up announcing the winners. Again, this is rehashed from last time, but we want to make sure we highlight and celebrate our community. So special thanks to Jan, Daniel, and Stefan for being the winners of those awards. Thanks to the community for voting and helping us shine the spotlight on these folks. They deserve it. So just congrats to everyone for being part of the community, for supporting the community, supporting the Jenkins project, and for all the work that you do. A couple new blog posts that we have as of yesterday are the Your Kit and JetBrains sponsorship announcements, and these are both from Alex Brandis. So Alex worked with these companies to now they are sponsors of the Jenkins project, which is really, really great, fantastic. So JetBrains has products like IntelliJ, which is a really great IDE. It's something that for instance, I use for writing documentation. It helps with just maintaining the code database. It's really great tools. And they're now able to provide licenses and subscriptions for core maintainers and active contributors. And then Your Kit is a Java profiler. So they help with analyzing performance regressions, testing, and just again maintaining Jenkins core and code. So these are really, really fantastic. Thank you very, very much to Alex for the work on this. If you are interested and are curious about getting a license or a subscription, reach out to Alex via email. His profile is linked in the sponsor posts here in the how to request a license section. Alex is responsive and has already been working with Valentine on getting a license. So just a really fantastic win, and the ability to say that we have a couple new sponsors that are really big deals. So just fantastic all around. Thanks to Alex for that. And then we have also received a sponsorship donation from AWS. That'll be another blog post upcoming that I'm putting together now, so more to come on that. But continued thanks and great success with AWS just providing more sponsorship for being a continued sponsor of the project. And with the recent moves and work that's been done on the infra side of things, more crucial than ever. So just fantastic. As far as Google Summer of Code 2025 goes, we're well into the coding period. We've got midterm evaluations coming up in the next week and the midterm presentation in just a couple weeks. We're all really looking forward to that. All 5 projects are making great progress, and the weekly check-ins have been shining the spotlight and the light on the work being done, the participants, and all their continued efforts. It's really great to see, and the enthusiasm that they bring to the project is really welcomed and appreciated. Bruno or Chris, any notes on GSOC stuff for today?
You sound old, Chris.
I think it's except for one project, that's kind of slow, but it's still okay. All projects are doing fine, I think.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Next topic is the Chinese documentation site. So this is something we've been discussing. And so Chris has started prototyping things, or at least proposing options as far as what the doc site might look like. It's not necessarily going to follow the same retooling that we're working on in the Google Summer of Code project, but it is working parallel to that. So there's options there. Yeah, Chris, do you have any notes, anything you want to share about this?
Yeah, so I think I was able to chat with Mark last week about this a little bit. So I'm gonna start working on this, I think later this month starting. So I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but definitely going to start later in July.
Awesome. That's great to hear. If you need help with anything along those lines, I know I'm already on the maintainers team, but if you need help with any documentation needs in terms of creation, moving, anything like that, just let me know. Happy to help, of course. But yeah, that's great news. Thanks very much, Chris, and thanks very much, Mark, for helping move that along. Next up, the good first issues on Jenkins.io. So Meg brought this up recently, but we're looking a little low on the good first issues good first issue issues. Chris created an issue to kind of like go through and audit and create some new ones, but we I still have to go through and do that myself. We've had a lot of contributors come in and work on some of these things over the last couple of years, so it's been depleted. But yeah, something that we just need to do, and we'll refill and repopulate once we have the time and the ability to do that. So still work in progress. For the LTS releases and the weekly releases, so we've got LTS 2.516.1 scheduled for July 23rd. This is a big one because we're going to be including the updated header redesign that Jan Faracek and others have been working on. That was included in weekly back in April. Now it's going to be brought to the LTS line, so we have that coming up. That's a big change, and that's going to change how where things are, and a lot of other parts of the UI are going to have manage Jenkins up in the corner here, additional actions, breadcrumbs. There's a lot of UI changes that are coming as part of it, so something to be very aware of. And to make sure that people are aware of that, we're going to have a live stream on July 16th, and it's the first YouTube live stream, and that'll be hosted and done by Darren Pope and Jan Faracek. So the two of the best people to be talking about this are going to be the ones showcasing all the changes coming up. Jan is also preparing a blog post, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was something we discussed recently. So there's going to be a lot of communication around this release. The link I accessed just a second ago is the changelog and upgrade guide. I've created that as a pull request, and that's ready for review. I've shared it with the docs channel. So would love to just get as much review on that as possible with all the changes coming. And we'll talk a bit more about the header and the July LTS in just a moment here. But that is something to be aware of, and it's something that we're really looking forward to. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes to get it ready for release. So really just excited about that getting published and available for everyone. Mark, before I go any further, any notes or anything on the release? Or
Nope, you said it very well. Thank you.
okay. And then the next up is the 2 weekly changelogs, or the 2 weekly releases we've had is 2.517, 2.518. Both of them over the last couple weeks. No real issues have emerged from them. Everything seems to be all right. And they've been, some of these changes have been backported for the LTS release as well. So things to adjust header UI, icons, functions, stuff like that have been backported here. And then just yesterday, we had a Jenkins security advisory. So this is only affects plugins. There's no Jenkins core part of the advisory. So, which is why the weekly went out on Tuesday as usual. But if you're curious as to what plugins are affected by this, definitely check this out. Security team, as always, has done an excellent job of putting this together and making sure it gets published. And we were able to post that online to our socials to make sure that everyone is aware of that as well. And so part of the July LTS is the header redesign, which we were talking about. There's lots of changes to be aware of. We've got a blog post that's going to be coming up, the LTS live stream that we're going to have. And then, Mark, are you and Darren going to be doing the what's new after the fact as well, after the release? So
yes, yeah, we'll do a what's new also. So there will be multiple voices talking about what's coming.
great, fantastic. And so just to be clear, the live stream will happen before the release happens, and then the what's new will happen after the release happens. So we'll have 2 different points of reference for what's coming and what's happening. So really great to have that. Again, as I showed in the pull request, the upgrade guide is also going to reflect changes in the header, so the new UI. And there's still going to be more to come with that after the 0.1 release. There's still going to be more work to do in terms of refining and other refreshments, but everything looks pretty good thus far. And yeah, In terms of the documentation, there's going to need to be some updates within the documentation to reflect the new UI. I've created a tracking sheet for my own purposes so that I can make sure I know what needs to happen there. Thankfully, it's not an extensive list, and even if there's 47 lines, that's nothing compared to what some of the infra team and plugins have been going on. We've got the several projects in the works for their plugin maintenance that that doesn't compare, but we're going to take care of that. I'll make sure that the screenshots are updated, and we'll make sure that the documentation highlights the new UI. Next up's the recent work that's been done for Jenkins.io. So thanks to Matthew Lean for fixing some syntax in the mirrors documentation that Damien recently created. There was an issue with the rsync that Matthew fixed, and thanks to him for that. And then Lewis Burks has recently updated the share button and helped update the Ruby version and the dependencies for that within Jenkins.io. So thanks to Lewis for that work. Mark went through and fixed some links that were using markdown formatting that were missed. So thanks to Mark for that. That makes sure that those links aren't broken or are now working. And then Birgit, thanks for fixing some other event links that were non-working or not leading to the correct location. Really appreciate that. Birgit's been doing some other work documentation-wise, but that's related to the Google Summer of Code project. So thanks for that as well. But I didn't want to go too in depth because it's a lot to talk about, and we only have so much time. But thank you very much. And then next up, so we have a new success story that was recently published and a new adopter that we've added to the adopters page. So the success story is from Amarula Solutions. So it's on success stories. This is really nice to have another adopter. We've had a couple of these in the last few months, which is really great to see. The success stories don't always get a lot of activity. So having so much in such short amount of time is really great to see. And that's new members of the community. That's new stories for Jenkins to share about how it supports different projects, different companies, and what they use it for, which is great. And so thanks to Michael Tremarchi for submitting the story and the doctor request. Really appreciate that there. And I'm sure I did not pronounce his last name properly because I'm very sure it's Italian.
You're right. It's pronounced Tremarchi, but you're close enough.
Yeah, I did the unfortunate American version of that.
Right. CH in Italian is always hard. Okay.
Yep. And if my mom heard me, she'd probably scold me right now, but that's okay. Yeah. Anyway, so the wiki migration redirect, this is something that I've been working on. I had to pause for a little bit because of the UI updates and screenshot updates that we're going to need for the header documentation. So this is something that's so ongoing. I'm going to return to this as soon as the LTS has been released and we've got that under our belts. So more to come there. I did run into an interesting issue where strings that are utilizing the same starting text wouldn't necessarily work with my proposed solution because it stops short of what we would need it for. So there's alternatives that I've come up with. It's just a matter of testing and verifying that they work the way that we need them to, without causing any disconnect or any issues for the existing redirects and the existing coding. So more to come on that, but that's something we'll figure out in due time. And then the added bonuses, once that's taken care of, once we've got that squared away and I have a better idea of what the process of creating the redirect looks like, we can actually add that documentation, because right now our steps for creating redirects just says create the redirect. There's no actual instructions on what that means or what that where to go to do that, where that has to lead to, how to configure that redirect, stuff like that. So once I have that solved, I'll be able to create that documentation. We'll have that information available to users, whether it's plugin documentation or wiki redirection, whatever it might be, we'll have that available. And then the removing Java 11 upgrade instructions. So this was an issue that BRG created. Since Jenkins does not support Java 11 as of recent LTS lines, this is something that we discussed. I brought it up with Mark. We talked about that. My proposed solution here is that instead of making it directly accessible within the platform support page or the platform information page, we just take that navigational piece out of it. The documentation is still available on Jenkins.io, but instead of it being right here, it's just available. If you need to search for it, you'll be able to find it. The 17 and 21 instructions are there and valid, and more importantly, what we support right now. So we get the added bonus of making sure that we're not misleading anyone inadvertently, if that were the case. But Mark's brought up a concern of what happens with search engine and what does Google find and what happens with that documentation after the fact. We'd have to test that out, but I think testing that out would mean merging it and seeing what happens. But the idea is that we're not removing any of the documentation itself, just the actual links to it or navigation from it here in the chapter. So the documentation, again, would still be available, just things aren't explicitly pointing to the upgrading to Java 11 instructions. So more to come with that. And I saw that Chris and some other folks have reviewed and provided insights. So thank you very much for that. And yeah, we'll figure that one out in time. Next up, so the plugin developer documentation. Again, this is something we've been discussing for a little while now. Antoine Neveu brought up at a previous docs office hours that there's a lot of work in progress pages in the plugin developer docs. And what do we need to do to provide a better, more confident experience for anyone that might be navigating over there? So providing that information is really good. We need to have someone with that information and then that knowledge provide that information in the first place, however. So it is something we have to source to that extent. And there are multiple tutorials that could be developed in terms of not just adopting and improving a plugin, but maintaining a plugin as well, taking it to the next step beyond what that process looks like for long-term maintainers, and specific tooling that is available. So Puppet, Chef, other things of that nature, that we just really need someone with that expertise to be able to provide that expertise. It's important, and it's something that we want to make sure we have, but there needs to be a little bit better idea of what that might look like from a developer's perspective. Hopefully Antoine will either join with us at some point in the future, or I can talk to him and see what he says directly. But yeah, having something a little bit that provides more confidence would be great to have within the plugin developer docs. And then the last thing I have on the agenda is the Blue Ocean deprecation. Again, something we've been talking about for a little while. The work to remove Blue Ocean from the documentation, or at least inform users about the eventual deprecation, has begun. We've moved tutorials around. We've updated the status note on Blue Ocean pages to inform users and readers that it is happening or that it's not actively maintained anymore. So there is more to come with that. We don't have a date or a timeline in terms of when that's going to happen just yet. But when we do, that'll give us a better idea of when all this needs to happen. And then we'll be working towards replacing the Blue Ocean documentation with reasonable alternatives, stuff like Pipeline Graph View, Pipeline Stage View, things that are already in place and available that replace some of the functionality, and just accept that if there isn't a direct one-for-one replacement, that we acknowledge that maybe users decide to create their own plugin to fill the need that they have. That's always great. Jenkins plugin extensibility is one of its core features. So we invite anyone who's interested to do such a thing. That's always welcome. And as an example, the pipeline graph view prior to the 2024 Jenkins Contributor Summit was in a very different state. The Contributor Summit helped kick off a lot of work, a lot of progress, and a lot of things happened as a result of the Contributor Summit and people being able to work together on that and collaborate. So the community definitely does its job of helping others and pushing the project forward. So it's always something that you can not expect, but something that genuinely happens and is just a great part of why the Jenkins community is still thriving and focused on the impact it's making. And Mark, so you just had something to the agenda there? What would you
I
like
just realized I needed to put a topic on the list and I had not done so. So now I've done it.
Would you like to talk to us about what that is?
Sure. I attended Open Source Summit North America a week or two ago. As part of that, there was a presenter or one of the booths there was from scarf.sh. This is an organization, a company that Linux Foundation has a contract with. And that contract allows them to do we can create a tracking pixel that we would embed in various pages. And in fact, you create a single pixel and you can identify it with different properties so it becomes usable on multiple pages. So one pixel can actually track many different pages. And given that, then when readers look at that page, that tracking pixel provides information to this data provider, and they can then present us with reports. I started with my first test of it on the Git plugin. I wanted to see how often is the Git plugins page read and by who. Unfortunately, it showed that, our plugins.jenkins.io does a really elegant thing. It uses the GitHub content distribution network to gather the images instead of getting them directly from its own source. Thanks, Chris. See ya. However, our documentation, I think, is different. I think there we're going through Fastly as our content delivery network. And so we might be able to use this tracking pixel concept to see how our documentation is being read. But the question to you as a group, are you okay with us attempting to track data about who's reading documentation pages? Where are they from? This thing even attempts to do things like guess which company they're with. Now, it's doing the guessing based on publicly available data, based on data that they acquire, etc. So it's not that there's anything nefarious about it. All it actually gets is whatever the user provided from their web browser in terms of what's the IP address of the request, what's the user agent, those kinds of things, right? It's not got any way of looking back inside the user system, but it's doing some inferences, and I confess, I watched myself and it correctly inferred the name of my employer. So I was, oh, wow, and it said, hey, this may not be correct. It warned me that this might be wrong, but we think the employer of Mark Wade is this company. Now, the question to you as a group, are you interested in that kind of thing so that you could decide which pages are most interesting for further refinement and which are less?
So I will say, for my purposes and for what I do, of course, I'd like to know a little bit more and better understand the popularity of certain pages, see what people are accessing. But something I've been trying to kind of do a better job of tracking or understand is the popularity and readership, viewership of the contributor spotlight. We have things like the social media posts, reviews, likes, reactions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't always necessarily paint the right picture or the most clear picture. And I, I think about myself where I don't necessarily have those socials that I'm going to these things from. So it would be interesting to see how many people are actually going to the site and reading these spotlights or reading these pages. Because we don't have a traditional visitor counter or visitor tracker like the .com boom would have on every site. So I think it'd be really useful and really great to have that sort of data, even if we don't do anything with it. Just having that information would be valuable.
Okay. Bruno?
I would say it's bad, but didn't we used to do so with Google or
We
something
did.
like that?
Yeah, and Google Analytics is the same kind of thing, right? Google Analytics is a similar technique where you can get all sorts of interesting data about who's reading your pages, how often, how long they stayed on the page. Now,
Yeah.
that sort of information is actually not available as far as I can tell from this service. They don't attempt to
Oh,
assess how long people stayed on the page or if they only read through half your page. That's a sophistication that I think Google has in their analytics that this thing did not seem to offer.
but that kind of data instead of no data is better, I would say. And yeah, I'm also interested if that's the case in what people are reading. Are we available to track where they are coming from, a search engine or Twitter or whatever?
Well, so what it shows me is a graph of the country from which they're reading. It's
Hmm.
not, I don't think it's showing any refer information, although we might be able to get refer information. I haven't tried to look for refer information. I was more interested in geography.
Okay, just to see if our links from X and other social media are
Right.
working or not.
Are they
Okay.
effective, right? That's a good question. It's a very good question. Any other concerns or objections? My thought was I could deploy it to a few pages and watch them and see if we can get some evidence that, hey, these few pages are being hit. And we as a group could choose to visit those pages just to test it. Put them on a relatively obscure page and say, hey, go read this page and let's see if it recognizes that you read it. What information does it tell us about you, etc.
If it were located in the header or footer, of course, we would be able to distinguish between all the pages that have been read. Or, I mean, you talk about putting that in some pages, not all of them. If we agree that it's a good thing for the Jenkins IO website, then we would maybe put it just about everywhere in the footer or the header or whatever. So, of course, it would work and would allow us to know which pages, not just saying always footer, because we don't care.
And that part I don't know. That's something I think we'll have to learn by experience, or we ask the person who was demonstrating it to me, his name's Avi Press, to come to the DocSig and do a demonstration for us.
Mhm.
Because I assume that all of you would be willing to listen to Avi's demonstration. Even better if Avi could demonstrate with some real data from our own project saying, hey, look, here's what this data says.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'll go forward. I'll propose a pull request to a pull request or a few pull requests to some rather obscure pages on www.jenkins.io, and then ask participants here, please go visit that page.
Mhm.
Then we'll watch to see what happens.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. And
Okay.
if it does come down to it that Avi's willing to join us and do a demonstration with that data, that'd be great to kind of get that whole pitch too.
Which he, as far as I could tell, he was. So absolutely. I've got some more learning I need to do to better understand how to use it. And I think if Avi sees how badly I used it, then he may guide us and say, "Well, look, here's the much smarter way to do this." And we could use that time to ask him about how to deal with the GitHub content delivery network. Because I still would like to answer my original question: how often do people read the plugins.jenkins.io page that's documenting the Git plugin? But all right, thanks. Sorry for the sidetrack, and thanks very much.
Good stuff.
Yeah, really interesting, Mark. Thanks for sharing that and bringing that to the session today.
Great.
That does wrap it up for everything that I had on the agenda. If anyone has any other thoughts or anything they'd like to share before we wrap up, otherwise we'll end the recording here. The recording will be available in 24 to 48 hours and posted on community discourse as always. And until then, until next time, we'll see you later. Take care, stay safe, and definitely reach out if you have any questions, concerns, or documentation needs.
Bye-bye.